Next to him, Charlotte Pickles, director of the public services focused think tank Restate, or I should say the think tank formerly known as Reform.
Oh, I thought I might get through at least one.
No, I'm too predictable for that, Charlotte, I'm afraid. To my right, Lucy Frazer, KC, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, and next to her, Jim Murphy, former Labour Cabinet Minister. We like to have a bit of balance on the programme, and former leader of the Scottish Labour Party. Although someone informs me on a text earlier, there's no such thing as the Scottish Labour Party, it's the Labour Party. That debate could last for the whole hour, basically, couldn't it? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you'd like to put a question to our panel, and we'd love you to watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
Right, our first question comes from Scott in West Hampstead, who says Britain's military defences have been hollowed out for decades, so much so that a Defence Select Committee report says that Britain is unprepared for an attack by a hostile state. How on earth did we get here? And who needs to do what to ensure that the British government fulfils its first and most important duty to protect its citizens from harm? Jim Murphy.
It is the first responsibility of any government to keep its citizens safe, safe at home, safe internationally. Charlie heard me talk about this morning. One of the things I like to say, because I think it's absolutely true, is one of the most important things a British Prime Minister can do to keep the United Kingdom safe is to keep Donald Trump committed to NATO. And for those of you who don't follow the detail of this, NATO is a military coalition of democratic countries, I think 48 of us. And the idea is an attack on one is an attack on all. And if Trump reneges on that commitment to defend Europe, he's spoken about it, but that's a tactical retreat he's had. If there's a strategic retreat from Article 5 of NATO, then all bets are off. Bets are off in terms of our security. And incidentally, all bets are off in affordability of the NHS and much else, because we'll then have to invest a huge amount more in our own defence. So I think the most important thing they can do is keep the United States committed to the global alliance. Other than that, we've got to invest in significant hard power, increased investment, but also smart power and soft power around the Foreign Commonwealth Office.
But do you think that a lot of the British public just aren't willing to engage in this debate and aren't willing to see more spending on defence in place of spending in other areas?
Yeah, well, very few British citizens are in the armed forces, or armed forces for all sorts of reasons are the smallest, probably the smallest they've ever been, or near the smallest they've ever been. So very few people have themselves or have relatives in the armed forces. So it's not as front and centre when it comes to an election campaign in the way that it should be. But I think what this government's trying to do, and I think hopefully, Ian, through this evening, you'll discover I'm not here to be I was a Labour Cabinet Minister, but I'm not here to argue their case. That's their job. But one of the things I think they're getting right is they are trying to ensure that defence investment is one lever to reindustrialise our country, so that in some of the communities which are a bit down in the dumps, who have economically really difficult times, they're now going to see munitions factories built. And hopefully the munitions factories for things we never use. Unfortunately, we now have to pass a lot of it to Ukraine. But I think if we use defence as a way to help reindustrialise parts of our country, that's a smart way to reconnect communities with the argument.
Lucy Frazer.
I'm also not here to be partisan, and I agreed with everything, actually, that Jim said. I would say it's not just, though, about the US and our alliance with the US. I think our alliance with Europe is also important. And I think also that, the government has said it's going to increase spending on defence, and it's absolutely right that it should do so. And other countries, particularly Germany, have significantly increased their defence budget. But I think we have also a role to play in ensuring that other countries in Europe also increase their defence budgets. And as Jim said, it's not just about spending money, it's about spending money smartly. and on the right things. And I am nervous about the procurement system that we have in this country, which doesn't always operate well at the best of times, but in relation to defence is so important, because it is really important that we build up our domestic ability to supply the UK so that we have some sovereign capability in some key areas.
But why have successive governments, Labour and Conservative, not seemed to get the need to spend enough money on defence?
I do think that the Conservative government spent on defence, and it did a strategic review. I think this government, to its credit, also did one, and it's announced additional spending on defence. I think one of the problems is that you need long-term spending, not short-term spending, and it shouldn't really be spent in terms of budget cycles. You need to set out a long-term vision and plan for how money should be spent on what is, as Jim said and is well recognised, is the most important duty of any government.
Iain Dale.
I will align myself with everything that's been said already. I think increased cooperation is important. And I think also something you said, Iain, in one of your questions, which was interesting, around kind of public engagement with the idea of defence. And that's something I want to touch upon, is the fact that the statement from the Defence Secretary this morning was completely inaccessible to British Sign Language signers. And to go back to the question that has been put by Scott around, the most important duty to protect its citizens from harm, I would go one further and say, yes, protect its citizens from harm, but they need to be made to feel safe. And if we're not communicating effectively with a significant proportion of the public, there's 150,000 people who use British Sign Language and you're not communicating with them, that's pathetic. I mean, for example, the Prime Minister said in another speech on defence many months back now, said every Brit has a role to play in defence. Well, you're saying that in a speech that didn't come with any British Sign Language interpretation. And
he was actually in Downing Street in their press room. So
I think that one was on tour somewhere. But in any case, there needs to be an interpreter in the room, for starters, because then that makes all broadcasts accessible by default. But I've contacted the Ministry of Defence this evening, and they've come back and basically said they can't live stream it on their social media channels because it's political content. And okay, I get that issue, but then they put the transcripts up online with the necessary redactions. That's not interpreted into BSL either. And English is a completely separate language to British Sign Language. And so if you're not having access to information, you feel isolated, you feel lost, you feel confused, you feel scared. And I'm just thinking there must be people out there who are wanting this reassurance that the Defence Secretary is intending to provide today, and they can't access it because it's, again, another oversight, and it keeps happening. They've announced BSL plans, it's not happening.
Charlotte Pickles.
So why have successive governments failed to make sure that we're prepared? Well, for the same reason that they failed to make sure we were prepared for a pandemic, because they're not thinking about the things that are going to come up, despite the fact that in the instance of a pandemic, it was number one on a national risk register, and Russia, China, the various other geopolitical challenges we have will, I'm sure, have been at the top, or certainly in the top few items within the more secret kind of national risks. So it's not that we haven't known; it's just because choices have been made to not prioritise it repeatedly, and that's a huge failure on the part of our political class. And it is true that this government is saying some good things and wanting to prioritise defence, but the target of 3% of GDP is by 2034, and that was announced at the beginning of this year. That's almost a decade to get to just 3%, which most people think is not high enough anyway. The munitions factories, great. Of course it will be brilliant to have munitions factories. I think a House of Lords report said that the amount of munitions we've given to Ukraine will take us about a decade to replace at the moment. But actually they want them operational by 2029, which is, again, 4 years from now? And that's probably ambitious. And I'm really glad that Lucy mentioned the procurement challenge, because defence has been absolutely woeful at procuring all of the things that we would need to protect our country. So just to give you a couple of examples, the Ajax armoured vehicle programme was authorised in 2010. Do you think we have it up and running? Have we got that now? No, almost 2 decades later, we still don't have what that was supposed to procure. And guess what? That's going to be out of date by the time we get it now. Or saw a recently stated in the Strategic Defence Review, on average it takes 6 years or more just to get to the point of awarding a procurement if in defence it's worth 20 million or more. And guess what? Nearly everything in defence is worth 20 million or more. So we started by just a failure to recognise that one of the fundamentals of protecting the country, whether that's in terms of warfare or on the civil front, is to be prepared in some sense, which we haven't done. And secondly, now we've realised we need to be, we're going at a glacial pace in the face of what are imminent and urgent challenges for this country.
Go on.
I think that is an important point. Tragically, unfortunately, it's now going to get better. And why I say tragically is because we're going to learn from Ukraine. We have a real-life existential experience on Europe's doorstep where it's a matter of life and death, and their very existence, they are having to procure and innovate at a remarkable pace. And I can only hope that, unfortunately, because of the tragedy of that war, the UK gets much better at it by learning those lessons. Just the last thing I'd say about this, I think, would be that I think it was the Polish Prime Minister who said, in terms of relations with Russia, we're not at war with Russia, but we're not at peace with Russia. And the UK's relationship with Russia is in a similar middle ground, not in a hot conflict, but not at peace. And I think our country has to realise that, and our public conversation has to reflect that.
Right, we'll come on to an allied question to this in just a few moments' time. Let's take a short break. It's 14 minutes past 8.
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:15 on LBC. Lucy Frazer, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, is here. Jim Murphy, former Labour Cabinet Minister. Charlotte Pickles from the think tank Restate. And Liam O'Dell, journalist and disability rights campaigner. Now, a follow-up text question from our last question from Barney in Nottingham. Is there anything we can do to stop Donald Trump betraying Ukraine, as deep down we all knew he would? Now, reports this evening say the White House has been negotiating a peace deal with the Kremlin without involving Zelensky in any talks, and the plan would involve Ukraine having to make its armed forces smaller and accept ceding territory to Russia. What a surprise, Charlotte.
I think this comes back to the point that was raised earlier by Jim, which is that we find ourselves very, very dependent on the US when it comes to defence and our national security. Is there anything we can do? I guess the answer would be if Europe did band together fully to push back on it. Presumably Ukraine will have to have some say in what this outcome is, and if they don't accept it, then if Europe were to stand very firmly behind them, I guess there may be scope to push back on it. We have seen these peace talks previously with Putin, and what we've seen each time is Putin actually not think he's got as much as he wants from a deal, and therefore to renege and to try and play for time and try and demand more. So maybe it is actually not over the line, but ultimately, unless Europe, us included, are willing to put our money where our mouth is and really to rearm and to get to a point where we can be a serious obstacle to countries like Russia, then we are going to remain dependent on a man in the White House who, I think as you indicated there, Iain, was always probably going to find himself in this position.
Liam?
I think there needs to be a greater kind of what Charlotte was saying, greater focus on kind of the European partnership, the coalition of the willing. Are they really all that willing? I feel like kind of what Charlotte has been alluding to, I think they need to be a lot more robust in standing up to Trump. I think at the moment there is a sense, at least to me, that they are trying to please everyone. They are trying to obviously appease Trump because that is obviously a major factor, but equally they are trying to they're kind of balancing that issue with the balancing of greater European cohesion. I think they need to be much more robust on that in order to then make the clearest possible message to Trump that this is completely inappropriate and unacceptable.
What do you think Keir Starmer should be saying to Donald Trump about if this turns out to be true?
I certainly think he needs to be a lot more vocal. I mean, it's. I was just trying to think, as you said that, whether there was another instance of Starmer needed to be more emphatic against Trump, and it's the BBC example as well. When he's suing the BBC, he's kind of said, I will, I stand up for an independent BBC. He needs to be a lot more vocal there, and a lot more vocal in times when Trump is kind of pressing the UK's buttons, if you want to use that analogy.
Okay. Lucy?
I think it's really important that Ukraine, whose citizens have been fighting this war for a long time, has a say in its future. And I think it's also really important that we don't send a signal to Putin that it's okay to win by force. And so any deal needs to recognise that Russia was an aggressor. On the counterbalance to that, Trump has brought some stability to the Middle East. And I think that bringing an end to the war would be overall a good thing. I would like to because the question sort of it implies that what, and you asked, Liam, what can the UK do? I mean, I remember when I was in office, we did everything possible in every single department to stand by Ukraine. So I wasn't in a department that was, on the front line of dealing with the war in Ukraine. But when I was in the Treasury, I made sure that in our international relations in relation to tax, we disassociated ourselves from Russia. I did the same when I was responsible for sports in relation to the Olympics, and I was actually sanctioned by Russia as a result of all the actions that I took.
You go up in my estimation all the time.
So I do think, and I do think that Ukraine and the war has fallen off the radar of the British people, and I do think that's a shame, because the consequences of the Russian invasion are so severe for the whole of Europe, including us, that it's really important that this is resolved well.
Jim?
I think actually the previous Conservative government, in those first hours, days and weeks of the 24th of February 2022? 22nd of February, I thought the UK government did a brilliant job. They were one of the first to commit to standing by Ukraine. Boris Johnson, who I've got trenchant criticisms of and other things, went to Kyiv and stood with Zelensky, and they provided the Storm Shadow missiles quicker than anyone else was willing to provide that capability to the Ukrainians. So I thought they did very well, as Lucy has alluded to. Trump treats Ukraine like he does with any real estate deal. It's a piece of land to be traded. And Liam's point, which is a fair one, I don't agree with it, Liam, but it's a completely fair one, which is that we should shout more loudly when it comes to Trump. There is absolute, in my judgment, but it's we all have, one of the reasons why these conversations work is we all have different points of view, is that there's no evidence of that ever having worked. And if I thought it would work, that Starmer should stamp his feet with Trump and it would work, then I would be saying so this evening. But the truth is, I think that Keir Starmer, with a small number of others in the international arena, have managed to mitigate much of what Trump wants to do. And I think Keir Starmer could be a lot more popular if he grandstanded. And he's chosen not to, and I think probably on balance that's the right thing to do.
I think there are instances where people can stand up to Trump, though. I think, for example, in the US currently, the National Association of the Deaf is currently in a battle with the White House over American Sign Language interpretation of its briefings. And the White House, surprise, surprise, has said, we're a little bit uncomfortable with the idea of Trump sharing a stage with anybody. Make of that what you will. But eventually the Trump White House has kind of backed down and has launched an ASL YouTube channel. I appreciate that's not necessarily on the same length as massive diplomatic relations on the issue of Ukraine, but it can show that certainly when we need to reinforce a message to Trump, there are avenues in which to do that he pays attention to.
Right, let's move on to Robbie in Chelmsford, who says, taking winter fuel off pensioners, cutting PIP from the disabled, and now punching down on desperate refugees. Is it any wonder Labour voters and even MPs want a change of leader? Jim, do you?
I'm not a Labour MP.
No, but you're a Labour supporter.
Yeah, I'm a Labour supporter. I was in the Blair government, and so in relative terms, I had the sunshine days. compared to what we have now. And we spoke about this earlier, didn't we, Charlie? The Blair-Brown government had a relatively benign inheritance from the major government. The economy was growing and things were improving, and that Labour government was the beneficiary of that set of circumstances. This Labour government, the Starmer-Reeves Labour government, is in a completely different position because there's an inheritance which is, I have no idea how, and I can say this now, I'm not in politics, I have no idea how they balance the books and the competing demands. We've just had a conversation about why we need to spend more on defence. Where does that come from? And the only solution to this is growing the economy, removing the barriers to economic growth and ensuring that businesses generate wealth, employ people, and increase the amount of taxes that are therefore paid. As for the individual decisions, I think they're all controversial. But I think it's all incumbent on us to say, okay, if I wouldn't cut that, what else would I cut? Or if I'm not going to cut, what tax would I increase? And if someone's got that worked out, I respect them.
So Starmer's safe, in your view?
Look, I think that we had 3 prime ministers. How many prime ministers? Again, it's not a kick.
I served under 5.
5? In what period of time, Lucy?
Just over 9 years.
Right. So I served under 2 in a period of 13. And it's just so much. We're a serious country.
It has happened before. I mean, there were 3 prime ministers between 22 and 24.
There were.
1832 and 1834
Yeah,
as
but
well.
22, 24, there's all sorts of reasons why that happened in 22 and 24.
No, but I think it's quite interesting that you don't seem willing to sort of go there in the way that Rachel Maskell, the Labour MP who was on Andrew Marr earlier, did go there and said, well, he's got to shape up or ship out. Maybe he's not the leader for our times.
Things haven't gone well. You can see in the opinion polls have not gone well. But almost every government, not all, but almost every government's unpopular midterm. I remember
Not this unpopular.
That's true.
His own personal ratings are worse than any other prime minister in history at this stage of the
it's been very difficult. I think the problem they have is I didn't hear Rachel's interview, but I think the major problem they have is they have not got a story about the country's future. They've got a set of decisions that they take, some of which I agree with and some of which I question, and there isn't an obvious joining of the various dots. So to lead and for people to follow, people need to know where they're going, and it's sometimes difficult to work out what the story of our nation's future is. And if anything I'd want to see corrective on is that.
Okay. Charlotte?
I think, as Jim said, each one of those things is controversial. I think that the winter fuel decision as the first thing out the gate of a new government was remarkable. What would we say? It was a bold decision, Minister, I think is the way you would put it, to go out for that. I mean, weeks before you were going to do a fiscal statement anyway? So it was just so badly handled. But ultimately, there is a finite amount of money, and if we look at, for example, the welfare bill, and particularly the disability and sickness benefits section of that, it is growing at a rate which is unsustainable. And that has to force you to make choices. And I think the proposals put forward that failed because of the backbench rebellion were again badly handled. They were ill thought through. There wasn't a narrative, as Jim is saying, more broadly about the government. But ultimately, if you're looking at adding another £20 billion onto the cost of those benefits by the end of this Parliament, so that's within a few years, you have to look and say, is the choice we're making an ever-expanded welfare bill, or do we want to spend more on defence to protect this country? Do we want to spend more on early years intervention to help children?
But what about Starmer's leadership? That's the question.
So I think Starmer's leadership has been woeful. You can look at the polls, you can look at the constant resets that we've had over almost on a weekly basis. I think at this point, when you keep blaming the people working for you, you might want to look at yourself, or certainly at least the decisions you're making as a leader. And I think it doesn't reflect well on a leader if you're constantly blaming other people around you. But, there was no plan when they got elected. Everybody said that.
Liam?
Well, I was just in the middle of taking notes. I think a lot of this comes down to, and I really appreciate that there's the note on there around PIP cuts and cuts to the disabled. It's absolutely nonsensical that we're in a position where we are cutting PIP, which needs to be stressed is not a employment benefit. It is something to help with the extra costs of disability and disability living. But then at the same time, they're cutting access to work, which helps them get into work, which would then coincide with the PIP. I will recommend people check out 2 great campaigns that are on this, the Access to Work Collective, and I have to be careful with this one, Taking the PIP.
Very good.
I think
well saved, Liam, if I may say so. You saved me from Ofcom problems.
Yes, I'm more than aware of Ofcom regulations
tonight already.
But I do think there is an interesting point, I think, underpinning a lot of this around the real crisis in communication. I would think back to what Dawn Butler said to Owen Jones in an interview a while back, which is that she expressed a frustration around how there are a lot of good things, in her view, that Labour are doing, but that's not cutting through. And I think...
That's what all governments say, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Make of that what you will. But I think when we talk about a change of leader, people want change, and I don't think Labour's been offering that as much as they go on about it.
Hugh wishes to correct Jim. He says Jim Murphy was an MP under 4 prime ministers. He's forgetting Cameron and May.
Oh, I was in government under 2. That's my... Yeah,
I can't remember how you phrased it.
Oh, no, but I said 2 prime ministers in 13 years. So is it Hugh?
Yeah.
Hugh, I'm not in politics anymore, so I'm happy to say you're wrong. Because I was a minister under 2, but a member of Parliament under 4.
So I'm going to agree with Jim that he was wrong, but about a different point. So I think he was sort of implying that the reason that the Labour government are doing badly is because they inherited a poor economy. And I think that's a little bit disingenuous and untrue. The mistakes that the Labour Party, the Labour government have made have been of their own making. I'm not saying that the economy that they inherited was as good as it could be, but it's certainly the missteps that they have taken have been self-imposed. We started with the expenses scandal. And buying of glasses and suits. We've had the statement about the island of strangers, in which Keir Starmer felt the need to U-turn his own language. And then we've had a series of economic measures where there's had to be a U-turn. Those are all of their own making. And we talked about how many prime ministers I've served under, and whether there is an issue of Keir Starmer and his leadership. And I think that the reports that I'm reading remind me of those times when I was in government, of when there felt to be a momentum towards change. And, I feel
Well, just on that, let's have a yes-no answer from each of you. Do you think that Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister, say, a month after the May elections next year? Yes or no, Jim?
Yes.
I'm not going to do yes or no, because I think it's more. Well, I think it's more difficult than that.
I'm going to insist.
Well, I'm saying yes because I actually believe it.
Okay, no,
I'm not saying it because it's unusual. I'm not saying it because it's unnewsworthy.
I think the only thing that's certain in politics is that it's uncertain. So everything can change. But I think the answer is more yes now than it would have been 6 months ago.
You mean that he will be?
Sorry, the more answer is no now than it would have been 6 months ago.
Do I think he will be Prime Minister after the next May election? I would say yes, but it still won't look as good for him as it is now.
Charlotte?
I don't think so.
Well, tune in this time next year and we'll know.
I'll bet a pound.
Right, we've got more questions coming to our panel in just a moment. 0345 6060 973 is the number. 8:33 is the time on LBC. Daryl Jackson's here with the headlines.
Dale on LBC.
8:35. We've all just been discussing our favourite films of all time because I was tasked with doing my top 5 films for the Daily Express website, which you can have a look at if you really want to find out what they are, but you won't be impressed. Right, Lucy Frazer is here, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Jim Murphy, former Labour Cabinet Minister. Charlotte Pickles from the think tank Restate. Now, just tell us where Restate stands in the sort of spectrum and what your main aim is.
So we are genuinely cross-party. So So I have both Conservative and Labour, either current or former ministers on my advisory board. Our tagline is bold ideas to remake the state. So we like to think we're the sort of disruptor end of the think tank world. So we firmly believe you need radical reform to completely reimagine how the state functions. And we focus principally on kind of domestic policy.
I seem to remember Liz Truss used to work for you in your previous incarnation.
Did not work for me.
No.
But yes, she was many, many moons ago, I think deputy director at the time. So I guess we're one of the few organisations that, having had a prime minister, don't advertise it very widely.
How long did you have her for?
So I didn't work. It was a long time ago. But I think probably, I don't know, a couple of years. I don't know, like not.
What have I started here? Liam O'Dell is here, journalist and disability rights campaigner. Right, a text question from Rico what a great name, in Doncaster. Is Albania's Prime Minister right to say that Shabana Mahmood's comments about wanting to send refugees from his country back home is populist far-right rhetoric? And when Nigel Farage is posting AI photos of her in Reform UK pyjamas... Oh my goodness. Is this making her more or less likely to become Prime Minister one day? Well, Albanian leader Edi Rama has made these accusations against the Home Secretary after she claimed that Albanian criminals, her words, had come across the channel and vowed to deport Albanian families if they refused to return home voluntarily. Lucy Frazer.
Well, I think both those things are potentially increasing her status within the country and therefore more likely to make her Prime Minister at some point, but certainly increasing her popularity, as immigration is obviously one of the biggest challenges that the government faces and one of the things that people care most about. I mean, in relation to Albania, obviously that's what I've just said is a domestic how she might be viewed domestically. Obviously, it's important that we maintain good relationships with foreign countries. But we did, when we were in power, we did do a returns agreement with Albania to stop the crossings over the channel. And we actually decreased Albanian crossings to this country by 90%.
Liam?
I agree. It will certainly raise her profile. I think that the thing I want to pick up on that question is around the posting of AI photos. It's something that I cover quite a lot at The Independent with Indy 100. I think back to in the run-up to the US mayoral election in New York, Zoran Mamdani was targeted by Andrew Cuomo with fake AI videos. And I just think we really need to wake up to the fact that that is a growing problem, and I really hope it doesn't become as more...
Is it really a problem? I mean, it's clearly not a serious thing to put her in reform pyjamas. Nobody seriously believes that she would have been wearing reform pyjamas, or even pyjamas at all, maybe.
Oh, you've gone too far. You've gone.
That's the line that's crossed right there.
So many Ofcom problems tonight.
Only you could get away with that.
But we talk about how not knowing what to believe anymore. And of course, yes, there is a degree of scepticism that needs to be applied with someone who is obviously a Labour government minister wearing pyjamas belonging to a rival political party. But there is a degree of decorum expected of MPs and political leaders.
Clutch those pearls a bit harder, Liam.
There's clearly, I mean, look, there's a very serious point about deep fakes that we're not taking seriously enough. But I think
this is not on that scale, is it?
I think this is absolutely just, a sort of bit of kind of fun, in the same way that it seems that no reform representative at the moment can't go on the radio or TV and say, is she defecting to reform or something along those lines. But I think in terms of the question that, 70-odd%, I think in most polling of the country, think immigration is a problem and needs a serious response to it. And I think part of the challenge that the Labour, particularly Parliamentary Party, have at the moment is that they're actually not that aligned with the views of the public. So that will make Shabana Mahmood popular. But also, are we seriously saying we shouldn't deport organised criminals? I mean...
No, but I think she fell into a trap there, didn't she, of tarring all Albanian asylum seekers as criminals.
So I think it's obviously she's said it today. I've read very limited amounts about it, but I did read that there was a point around, I think she said there's about 700 families who should have been deported who are refusing to leave and are still being funded by taxpayers. And I think that's a very legitimate thing to say that that's not on. And actually British taxpayers, we've already talked about the pressure on the public finances, the fact that we can't fund a lot of things that we need to fund. Go and talk to families that are struggling to make ends meet. And actually, no, it's not okay that there are 700 families from Albania that should have gone home and haven't done so.
Jim?
I know Eddie Rama really well. He's probably Europe's tallest minister or prime minister. I'd say two things about it. Firstly, Albania, I know there's a caricature about Albania, but it's a really important country for the UK. It's a country where Russia is desperate to extend its influence. Eddie Rama, as a political leader, has stood up to a lot of those pro-Russian forces in his country, and he loves the United Kingdom. I promise you, he listens to many. I was going to mention a rival. There are rival channels.
I'm not sensitive about these things.
Well, I know him. He regularly listens to the BBC Today programme of a weekend, of a week. He loves the United Kingdom, and we're really fortunate that we have such a close ally in the Premiership of Albania.
Well, when you next see him, you might want to recommend Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Much more entertaining.
I'll do that. I'll try and see if we can get
why
on.
not this show? I think you should be recommending this show.
I'm too bashful, Lucy, as you know.
Well, I will say it on your behalf. I think you should do that.
I will actually. Do you know what? I'll text him
if you can tell him, I'll give him an hour. If he wants to come on this programme, next time he's in London, we'll give him an hour and he can tell us exactly how brilliant his country is, because he is a real character, isn't he?
I'll WhatsApp him this evening. He's a former professional basketball player. When you go into his office, he's also an aspiring artist. He's less bashful than you. He's got his own paintings in his office. So, but the second point I was going to make...
I haven't.
You've got your own portrait in your office, not your own painting. But the second point I was going to make is that I think we're just all going to have to get used to this in terms of Shabana's language, because there's no diplomatic way to have a course correction on our migration policy. So earlier this week she said we're open to ending visas for people who come from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Angola and Namibia. Now, that's really, used Liam's phrase, that's really pipped those countries off. And there is just no diplomatic way to do these things.
If you were Shabana Mahmood and said that, she would have said the real word, because she's got a bit of a potty mouth, hasn't she?
Yeah, well, I'm only being guided by Liam, and you're off
as we all should.
But I think if we're going to have a corrective on our migration policy, we are going to pip off some of our close allies, of which one is Eddie Rama. But the great thing about Albania's political leadership is, while they're really annoyed, they will remain committed to a very close relationship with the UK.
Good.
Do you think it's sensible of Reform to have posted that? Or do you think, is it good PR?
To be fair, I haven't seen it.
Well, I haven't either, but just, is it sensible for them to be putting another political figure through their channels, suggesting that she is aligning with their policies?
Well, I think from their point of view, I'm trying to think, if I was them, how would I respond to that? I think they would say, well, it's a good thing if other political parties are adopting our policies, just as Kemi Badenoch is saying, look, if you want to abolish stamp duty, Rachel Reeves, in the budget, go ahead, make our day.
But equally, if they can get mainstream political parties to adopt the policies that the people care about, then maybe people will vote for the mainstream political parties.
Well, maybe, but I suspect Nigel Farage would say, well, OK, if they make us as a party redundant, I will have achieved my goals.
Mm-hmm. Isn't also, though, the calculation that actually it riles up the quote space so much that there is such a fallout that actually it's not Starmer and Shabana going into the next election. It's a much more soft to harder left party going in.
Corey and Chris have delightfully posted the picture of Shabana in her Reform pyjamas with a poster of Nigel behind her on her bedroom wall and a Reform Party flag as well. And she's sitting cross-legged in her Reform pyjamas. I think looking at her phone, is that right?
That's a very good image description.
Yeah, that's very good. And they've got the Reform football
and they've got an England flag.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And I think that's the signed Nigel Farage T-shirt as well.
You see,
That's correct.
I can't. I mean, so, look, a lot of. I mean, we would have said in the past that was photoshopped. We wouldn't have said AI, and it's just a sort of modern version of Photoshop, isn't it? I can't get very excited.
Well, AI is corrosive of democracy.
That's another point I was trying to make.
But that's not.
No.
That's parody, and that's, in my opinion, that's fine. But what I think it probably does, although I'm not a great advisor on what's happening inside the minds of reform people, I think she's probably got under their skin a little bit. Because the smart thing would have been to say something completely different. And I don't think.
But then you could also say that Nigel Farage has got under her skin when she, was it in the House of Commons or a Sky News interview, she basically said, "Well, I don't care what he thinks; he can sod off."
Oh, I think it's
not the sort of thing you would expect of a Home Secretary to say.
You said she has a potty mouth.
I think she does.
That's completely on brand. So good luck to her. I think we're just going to have to get used to Shabana. Shabana's a new character for many people in British public life. People are starting to get to know who she is. She's a minister with genuine momentum, and she knows what she believes. And in politics, knowing what you believe, I mean, in the previous government, the minister who most got criticised would have been Michael Gove. But I think it's reasonable to say Michael knew what he believed, and therefore he attracted criticism.
I think the same about Kemi. I think Kemi knows what she believes, and she's a person of conviction, and that is her biggest superpower, because when she speaks, she has authenticity because she believes in what she says. And I think the biggest thing about Kemi is that she
How have we got to Kemi?
Well, because like Shabana, you're saying about Shabana, she has her own personality, and she's not swayed, of course.
She said she never has gaffes, and she's had gaffes.
Did she say that?
She did. She said she's not someone that has gaffes, and gosh, she's had a good couple.
She has had a few. Well, she'll be on this programme this time, well, not quite this time next week. She's coming on Budget Night at 7 o'clock to do an hour-long phone-in, so do tune in for that. It's 8:48.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why is there delay?
Straight to the point.
This government is unravelling every
Question with Iain Dale. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app.
10 to 9 on LBC. Lucy Frazer, Jim Murphy, Charlotte Pickles and Liam O'Dell are here answering your questions. Here's a text question from Sarah in Abingdon. Scientists have warned that the food we eat now is slowly killing us all. That's cheerful. And putting higher taxes on them is one of the ways to make us all eat more healthily. Are sin taxes really the answer to our terrible diets? Well, the background to this is as follows. A major new study into ultra-processed foods has concluded that they are damaging all of our internal organs and putting us at risk of a number of chronic illnesses, including obesity and depression. And the scientists behind the study say governments need to put higher taxes on ultra-processed foods, along with clearer warnings on the labelling of those products, with the taxes used to fund better access to healthier foods. Bang goes my M&S lasagna tonight when I get home. Lucy, this is. I mean, your government had to wrestle with this about sort of. There's a sugar tax, and now people are talking about putting taxes on these sorts of things.
Yeah, I don't think that the taxation is the answer. I do think it's a major issue that what we eat really affects our health, and I think education is the way forward to ensure that we know what we're eating, what's good and what's bad. Many people don't even know that it's bad to eat certain foods, so I think that is the way forward to change people's diets. And I do actually think that the younger generation are much more aware of healthy foods than I think my generation were.
Jim?
So my personal view is I don't think taxation is the right way of doing it. I think transparency is. And I'm pretty comfortable with labelling that allows people to make choices. I think it's really difficult to say to those people who eat most processed food, ultra-processed food, and I know it's a caricature, but many of the poorest people in this country don't have time to cook the type of meals that a lot of others would take for granted. So I think adding cost to working class, a highly kind of financially stressed families is difficult. So I'd rather they had transparency and we could all make decisions. I can see everything on the food, on the alcohol, and on everything we consume. But then I'm probably the world's least healthy vegan.
Well, you're certainly, how can I put this, not exactly obese. Another reason why people should be watching us, not just listening to us.
I'll take your word for it.
I really appreciate what Jim said about how with some people can't prepare foods, and therefore, obviously, there is a degree to which ultra-processed foods help with that. I do agree as well with Lucy that education is and kind of the more information and transparency that we have will help people to make more informed choices. And also, I really regret not yet getting round to the book Ultra Processed People, because I hear that people have said that that's a really interesting book to read on the subject. I also know that obviously we've had that recent ban on refillable drinks at certain restaurants.
Really?
Yes. So, for example,
Nando's will go out of business.
Well, I was going to mention brand names, but I wasn't too sure what the rules are on that.
We don't have any.
Nando's are planning to phase that out, although I have been a few times in recent weeks and they're still using it. So
a few times in recent weeks.
I go to theatre often, Ian. I have to have a quick wish. Okay. I have to have a quick dinner.
Charlotte.
Do you know what's interesting about that? So I'm going to drop a name. There's a place called The Chicken Shop, which is fried chicken, which I love. And there's one in Hammersmith. And actually, they have to stop free refills of the full fat Coke or whatever, but not the diet ones, which is actually just as bad for your ultra processed, which just shows that, you know, these decisions.
Does that come from government, or is that from
I think so. I just noticed it last time I went in, not as frequently as you going to Nando's, but occasionally. But in all seriousness, look, I think the problem with saying we need to educate people better is that we've said that for goodness knows how long, and we don't do it, and it's not very effective. And I think the problem with saying we need greater transparency is that actually the harassed mum who's working 2 jobs and is stressed and just needs something to put into the oven quickly for a kid to go out to do a night shift is not going to sit there poring over the information on a package. So, you know, we are in a position now where, as nice as it would be to not have government have to intervene in a way, where if we're serious about cutting down on the huge cost in many different senses of obesity and diet, then we probably are going to have to be a bit more interventionist. And I don't know that tax is the answer for the very reason that Jim said about the people that hits hardest, which are those that tend to be struggling to make ends meet. But, you know, we could be banning certain ingredients. We could be looking at actually the way that food is made and the combinations of ingredients we're putting in it, because I think it's the cop out really, just to say we need to teach people to cook food better and we need to educate them and we need to make it more transparent, because I just don't think that
Richard
works.
has just sent me a graphic from Wetherspoons which says customer notice hot chocolate. Through recent government legislation, changes hot chocolate and mocha are now excluded from the free refill offer.
It's sugar levels.
Thank you for your understanding.
Yeah, sugar content.
Not sure I'd be I don't like hot chocolate anyway. But anyway, right, let's go to Martin in Doncaster. Martin, good evening.
Hi, Ian. Yeah, I think Jim will like my question. As an England fan, are the panel happy like me to see Scotland playing at next year's Football World Cup?
Well, anybody that says no will never be invited back. Charlotte.
I want to be invited back, so do I have to
Well, you're really not happy about Scotland qualifying.
No, I'm delighted because I don't think they'll go much further.
Jim, I think I need to give you the right of reply.
What a night.
To be fair, I have listened to Jim all day long talking about the joy of Scotland. So.
What a night. I mean, it was, not everyone will have watched it, but 3 of Scotland's 4 most famous goals were scored in one game.
Yeah,
Archie Gemmill scored in 1978 against the Netherlands at the World Cup in Argentina. But otherwise, the goal scored last night by 3 substitutes. So it is such. I know people. I was in a pub in London watching it, and there was only 2 of us actually paying any attention to it. So we were pretty noisy. It was myself and my son. But it's such a special occasion for Scotland to be in a World Cup.
Absolutely right.
And it would be remarkable if all the nations
And it
United
could happen.
Kingdom
It
were
could
able
happen.
to go to a
Plus the
World Cup
Republic of Ireland.
for the first time
I got into trouble last night for including the Republic of Ireland
in the
among
home nations. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
as an Irish citizen, I would have chastised you for it as
would
well.
you?
But
I always want the Republic of Ireland to
you
win.
spoke about history in 1922. I mean, there was an act of union in 1801 and
But if
1800.
the route had been
whatever it was.
on the other foot and England had been up to qualify, obviously we hadn't conceded a goal in the whole qualifying
Are
tournament.
you not a UK broadcaster? Why are you saying we?
Because I'm English.
Okay, very good. Well done.
And a quarter Scottish actually as well.
okay.
But would you be cheering for England as much?
I'm happy with. Do you know what? I'm happy with all the countries, the United Kingdom, getting to these tournaments.
Yeah, me too.
The only
Would you
thing that
cheer for
frustrates me.
England? I feel like
well,
that
the
was
only
a
thing
bit
that
of a
frustrates me
non-answer
is the only thing that frustrates me is that I hear a rumour that England won the World Cup in 1966.
No, West Ham did.
Yeah, the Academy of Football won it, of course. But I hear a rumour England also won it. And the thing I love about English folk is they never go on about it.
No, that's absolutely
It's
right.
remarkable.
Lucy.
But I don't know if it's a true rumour that England won the
No,
World
you
Cup.
used to be sports minister.
I
You
did.
could have been going to
I
the World
know,
Cup.
I know. Very sad. Yes, of course. And I'm not just saying that because I'd like to be invited back.
I'm just
Liam?
I am thrilled. I'm not following closely sport. I'm not really a big sports fan. However, what I will say is that it's any representation in sport is fantastic, including, can I shout out the UK Deaf Olympics team who are currently in Japan doing great work over there.
Right, our fun question, which I'm not sure this is going to work, given that I did tell you what it was in the break. And anyway, Ed in New Cross says, Mick Jagger turned up at his old school in Kent today and spoke with some of the pupils there. Who's the most famous person who turned up to your school? With some trepidation, I'm going to Charlotte first.
Trepidation because you know that I can't think of anyone who was famous. And so I was actually trying to think if there was anyone famous who just came from my town. I come from a little town called New Milton on the south coast, which I actually can't think of anyone even famous who's from...
Well, I've never heard of it. So
exactly,
I'm not surprised.
right? Yeah, so no, I can't think of
Okay.
anyone famous.
Liam, can you do better?
Not persons, but people the Wanted went to school. I didn't see them because I was on the race.
Are they a popular music beat combo, Your Honour?
Yes, yeah, they had a hit with All Time Low a few years back, but I wasn't there. I was
No,
on
they
a
count as
sticker size.
famous. Jim?
I can't think of anyone. I'm sorry. Look, I went to a normal working class school in a Glasgow housing scheme.
You just told me you went to school in Cape Town.
And then we emigrated.
Oh, right.
And I went to
Because you got
school. I
expelled.
went to school in Cape Town. Well, I left Cape Town because I was conscripted into the South African Army under apartheid.
What?
Yeah. Can you tell by the accent? I can talk like that too if you want.
I love South African accents.
Well,
I'm one of the few that does. But
I'm okay with them now, but when I lived in South Africa, it was just kind of associated with apartheid and racism.
Yeah.
But, so no, I can't think of anyone famous who ever thought of visiting any of the schools that I ever went to.
Lucy?
So I can't also, I went to school in Leeds and I can't think of anybody who are famous who came to my school. And I'm racking my brains and I can't actually remember anyone who came to our school.
You went.
No, I mean who came to visit and speak. I can't think of any
No, we didn't have that
speakers who
either.
came into the school. I mean, I'm sure they must have done. But
We
I
had
can't
Shirley
remember.
Williams when she was in the Labour cabinet.
Oh,
so I think that
that's
counts.
good. That's
You must have
good.
went to a posh school.
No, I went to Saffron Walden County High School.
So why did she come to your school? Apart from the fact that you were there. and
Presumably
she knew.
someone invited her. She didn't just turn... I think she was actually the first politician I ever met. In fact, when I interviewed her a few years before she died, I did say to her, you do realise, Shirley, you turned me into a rampant Thatcherite. She found very, very funny.
So she inspired you in some way.
She did indeed.
Oh, brilliant.
Now, thank you all very much indeed for coming on the panel tonight. Monday's panel includes the human rights barrister, Dr. Charlotte Proudman, the columnist Angela Epstein, and the Lib Dem MP Tom Morrison. So they'll be here to entertain you and answer your questions on Monday. Now, in the next hour, it's International Men's Day today. So we are going to turn our attention to men's mental health. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has made a big announcement on that today. So we'll be talking about that. And I want to ask you this. Why do men in general, and I say in general, find it more difficult to talk about their innermost feelings than maybe women do? I think I'm a bit of an exception to this because my partner always says, can you keep nothing private when I'm talking about my own mental health or feelings on the radio. So I really do want to hear from a lot of men in this hour, but if you're a woman, how do you cope with your own partner's mental health problems?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, despite a damning report into the UK's ability to defend itself, the Defence Secretary has warned Moscow the UK's ready to respond to threats. John Healey's revealed a Russian spy ship is operating on the edge of British waters and is believed to be gathering information.
We deployed a Royal Navy frigate and RAF planes to monitor and track this vessel's every move, during which the Yantar directed lasers at our pilots. That Russian action is deeply dangerous.
The vessel is currently loitering off the northern coast of Scotland. Russian embassy officials say the country isn't interested in British underwater